Hello, this is Accorda Diesel, and welcome back to Film of the Year. As we continue into the 1890s, we're going to take a quick break and cover other events outside and inside the film industry that have occurred between 1890 to 1894. Before we start, here's a quick little summary about how these trivia episodes will work. First, we'll talk about events that have happened inside the film industry during a given time period. These can include introducing a new genre, film studio, new rules, or even just covering a certain film that has interesting information about it. Then I'll give a quick list of famous actors, actresses, and directors that were born from the same time period we're covering. Finally, we'll be covering important events outside the film industry. These events could be something small or something life-changing, but either way, these events will also help shape the way a movie can be made depending on what the culture was like at the time. With that now explained, let's get started with the events that have happened inside the film industry. Around sometime in 1890, an English inventor and cinematographer, Wordsworth Donnithorpe, would invent a moving camera and projection long before Edison's kinetoscope came into the States. Donnithorpe's own film camera would be named the Kinetosgraph. Wordsworth's idea of a camera to take moving pictures went as far back as 1876. But it wasn't until 1889 that together with his cousin William Crofts, they would invent a camera and station it at London's Trafalgar Square, where the camera would capture 10 frames per second. However, the camera presented with too many problems that it made it hard for both Wordsworth and William to commercialize their invention, as, at the time, people didn't see the marketing appeal to moving pictures. And by the time the kinetoscope did reach overseas, the popularity of other film-like inventions would overshadow the kinetosgraph itself. So any hopes of selling or using the Kinetosgraph in future projects would quickly fade away. On June 11, 1892, the world's first ever film studio named Limelight Department would be operated by the Salvation Army in Melbourne, Australia. Limelight Department was started sometime in 1891 by Adjutant Joseph Perry. Limelight started off as a photographic studio, tasked at making hand-colored magic lantern shows projected onto a large screen. When Perry was put on temporary move from Ballarat, Victoria to Melbourne, Commissioner Thomas Coombs tasked Perry into putting on a presentation of General William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, for the magic lantern. Coombs was very impressed with the quality of the presentation, so much so that he would put in the paperwork to make Perry's move into Melbourne a permanent stay, and with financial support from William's son Herbert Booth, Perry was given the freedom to change the studio from photographic to film. We will keep a closer eye on the studio as we move along. On January 7, 1894, William K.L. Dixon would file a patent for motion pictures, and the oldest film to register a copyright would be Fred Ott's Sneeze, and it's just as it sounds. One of Edison's assistants, Fred Ott, would take a pinch of snuff and would make a big, loud sneeze. On October 9, 1894, American author and photographer Alexander Black would write and present America's first pre-film picture play, Miss Jerry. Inspired by the works of Mindbridge and a positive response Black got from an early magic lantern show he presented back in 1889, Black set out to write and photograph his first picture play around the summer of 1894, with Blanche Bayliss playing the lead role of Jerry. In it, the picture play tells the story of a female reporter starting off a career in journalism to help with her father's financial troubles. During this, she would later fall in love with her editor named Mr. Hamilton, played by William Courtenay, and by the end of the play, the two would later get married and live in London. Using other methods made by Mindbridge and other photographers at the time, Black's main goal was to tell a fiction story using nothing but still photographs projected onto the magic lantern. Black would photograph any indoor scenes on a set created at Carbon Studios, while any outdoor scenes would be photographed around the cities of New York. What followed was over 100 glass slides photographed in opposed motion. Black would debut and project the images for a live audience at the same Carbon Studios where he photographed the play. Black would read all of the lines from a script that he made, while the slides would be dissolved using a double magic lantern, which would allow the characters to move from a fixed background every 15 seconds. The play was apparently well received when it was first shown, which would inspire Alexander to create 2 more picture plays in the late 1890s, until he would later move on to become a popular novelist and experiment more on photography and film. As time went on, many film historians seem to agree that Black would help set the stage of feature-length films and the idea of a screenplay. Moving along over at the kinetoscope, we would see the early stages of color films and the Annabelle dance short sometime between 1894 and 1895. The process of color films was much different than what we have today. Back then, in order to have a film done in color, editors and filmmakers would do what was known as hand coloring or hand tinting, which was quite a common thing in the early stages of photography. With this process, editors would painstakingly color in each surface frame, usually in watercolors, oils, or some kind of paints or dyes, and the most common tool that they would use would either be brushes, their own fingers, or cotton swabs. While it's clear to see why this wasn't common in all films, we will see a couple of films using this technique when they wanted to show color. Speaking of the kinetoscope, even way back then, films were still not safe from early censorship and or banning. One such short subject to censorship would be a short little film titled Carmencita, where a Spanish dancer named Carmencita would dance before a crowd as William K.L. Dixon would film her performance between March 10th to March 16th, 1894, making her one of the earliest female performers to appear before a movie, and one of the earliest movies to get censored or banned in some places, as the film would show off Carmencita's legs and undergarments. And finally, to wrap up today's film trivia, around late 1894 to early 1895, Edison and Dixon would try to bring sound into their pictures, with Edison and Dixon modifying the kinetoscope with phonographic cylinders in the machine, connecting the projector with a pulley system, and a pair of headphones for the viewers to put on so they could hear the sound while the film was being played. The device, named the kinetophone, would be accompanied by only one test film titled Dixon's Experimental Sound Film. The kinetophone would soon be a commercial failure when it was released sometime in 1895, due to the difficulty it was to try and synchronize film with the sound, and also with the fact that other companies would start to experiment new and better ways to insert sound in the film. We'll keep an eye on these as we move along. That is all the facts and events that have happened inside the industry. Now let's take a look at a list of famous actors and directors that were born sometime between 1890 to 1894. These people include Stan Laurel, Stanley Holloway, Groucho Marx, Oliver Hardy, Mary Pickford, Mabel Normand, Robert Harron, Harold Lloyd, Hattie McDowell, Lillian Gish, and Jack Benny. Finally, let's take a look at what else was happening around the world between 1890 to 94. On January 2nd, 1890, Alice Sanger would become the first female staff at the White House under President Benjamin Harrison. On January 15th, famous Russian composer Tchaikovsky would premiere his latest ballet at the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg, titled The Sleeping Beauty, based on Charles Perrault's famous fairy tale of the same name. The ballet was made with big success and would later become one of Tchaikovsky's best-known works inside and outside of Russia. On February 9th, the United States Weather Bureau, later known as the National Weather Service, would be established and located in Silver Spring, Maryland, where it would collect weather data and predict forecasts for anyone in the public to see. On April the 2nd, Emperor of Japan, Meiji the Great, will build the iconic Kashiara Shrine in Nara Prefecture, Japan. The shrine would later become a popular attraction for both Japanese locals and tourists. On May 2nd, President Benjamin Harrison would sign the Oklahoma Organic Act, under which Oklahoma would be a U.S. territory for many years until it would later become a state. On May 20th, famous Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh would move to Auvers-sur-Oise under the care of his doctor, where he would spend his final days painting until he tragically took his own life on July 27th on that same year, and would die 2 days later. He was only 37 when he passed away. On June 1st, the United States Census Bureau would use German-American Hermer Hollerith's tabulating machine, invented around the late 1880s, to tabulate census returns using the punching card input. This movement would become important for computing hardware, as it would help change the way we now record and process data. On June 27th, Canadian boxer George Dixon would not only be the first Canadian-born boxing champion, but he would also become the first black athlete to win a world champion in any sport, after he defeated Englishman Nunk Wallace in a knockout after 18 rounds. Sometime between January and June of 1890, African-American George W. Johnson will be the first successful African-American singer to record for the phonograph. Two of George's most popular songs during the mid-1890s would be The Whistling Coon and The Laughing Song, both recorded around 1890, and both making it on the #1 list between April to August in 1891. On July 1st, the iconic Ouija board will be commercially available to the United States, thanks to the help of American lawyer Elijah Bond. What started off as just an innocent parlor game, the Ouija board would later be known as a spiritual tool for people to try and contact the dead, and would later be under heavy criticism from the scientific community, many religious people, and even occultists. On July 2nd, the United States would pass both the Sherman Antitrust Act and the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. The Sherman Antitrust Act would help make sure that the market economy would receive fair and free competition from other businesses, and limit any monopolized practice, while the Sherman Silver Purchase Act would increase the amount of silver the government would be required to purchase, with the hopes that this act would help the farmers pay off their debts and boost their economy. The mining company also hoped that this act would increase the demand for silver and thus helping them stay afloat. On July 3rd, Idaho became the 43rd state, and on July 10th, Wyoming became the 44th state of America. Wyoming would also become the first U.S. state that allowed women to vote before the 19th Amendment was passed. On October 9th, French inventor and engineer Clement Ader would test out his first steam-powered aircraft, the Ader Helot, at Satory, France. Clement was able to get his plane off the ground at 20 centimeters, roughly about 7.9 inches, and he would fly uncontrollably at approximately 50 meters or 160 feet before landing back down. On December 29th, the infamous Wounded Knee Massacre occurred in Wounded Knee, South Dakota, where a Native American tribe, known as the Lakota tribe, would be fighting up against the U.S. 7th Cavalry Regiment, commanded by Major Samuel M. Whitside, over the fear of the Native American ghost dance as witnessed by the U.S. government, thinking that the tribe was planning on a violent rebellion. By the time the massacre was over 250 people from the Lakota tribe, including men, women, and children, would be killed, while the other 51 were wounded, with some also dying many hours or days later, while only 25 U.S. soldiers had also been killed, and the other 39 were wounded, where only 6 out of the 39 would later die. This massacre would be the final moment where a Native American tribe would be defeated and confined to a reservation. It would also begin a decline of American Indian Wars, as well as the American frontier. On January 29, 1891, Queen La'iuakalai would ascend to the throne and rule over Hawaii 9 days after her brother passed away, but she would not stay as the queen for long. After trying an attempt to pass a new constitution to restore the monarch power and voting rights for Native Hawaiians and Asians, her opposers, known as the Committee of Safety, under leaders of American Hawaiian Lauren A. Thurston and Stanford B. Doyle, began conjuring up a plan to overthrow the Queen on January 17, 1893, where it was made with big success and was done with little to no infighting. The pro-annexation group would then turn to President Grover Cleveland to annex Hawaii as American territory, but Cleveland would be against the annexation, citing that what the group had done was illegal and claimed that they had acted inappropriately during the overthrow. Cleveland would set his minister, Albert S. Wills, to try and work with the Queen to get her throne back, but when that didn't work, a new government would be formed, known as the Republic of Hawaii, on July 4, 1894, with Sanford Dole as its president until the islands would eventually be annexed soon. Sometime in January 1891, monthly British magazine, the Strand magazine, would start being published around the UK, and it's thanks to these magazines that famed Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes series would soon reach a greater audience, not only across the UK, but also the US. On March 3rd, the U.S. Congress would pass the International Copyright Act of 1891. This Copyright Act was the first U.S. congressional act that offered limited copyright protections in other countries outside the USA, provided that those nations were the ones selected under the new law. The law would also be important for Americans, as this law would also offer the same international copyright protections in those select nations. After the act was passed, the first foreign work that would be under protection from this law would be a British play titled Saints and Sinners by British author Henry Arthur Jones on July 3, 1891. Sometime around 1891, Canadian-American YMCA gym teacher and coach James Naismith would invent a new popular American sport known as basketball. Originally used with soccer balls and peach baskets, Naismith was tasked by the head of physical education to come up with a new indoor sport to help keep the kids active. Examining other popular sports that were common at the time, James Naismith would set up rules, known as the 13 Basic Rules, that would be slightly different than the modern rules we have for basketball today. The first game of basketball would take place sometime in December of 1891, and the first public basketball game took place in the YMCA building on March 12, 1892, where the students would play against the faculty, where the students won the game of 5-1. Beginning on January 1, 1892, Ellis Island, located on the New York Harbor between New York and New Jersey, would become the hottest spot for immigrants looking to become U.S. citizens. Between the 1880s to the 1900s, over 800,000 people would immigrate into the United States. On January 27th, German mechanical engineer Rupert Diesel would apply for a patent for a compression ignition engine known today as a diesel engine, named after Rupert himself. The diesel engine will later be beneficial for stuff like buses, trucks, trains, and many more machines. On April 15th, founders Charles A. Coffin, Thomas Edison, and J.P. Morgan would combine both Edison General Electric Company and Thomas Houston's Electric Company into the more well-known General Electric Company, stationed in New York City and with Charles Coffin as the company's first president. On June 7, 1892, a mixed-race American by the name of Homer Plessy would be arrested and tried under Louisiana court after he deliberately sat on a whites-only train car in order to protest against Louisiana's Separate Car Act around 1890, which called for separate but equal train cars for blacks and whites. Plessy and his lawyers would try to fight this new law all the way to the Supreme Court, claiming that this new law violated the 14th Amendment, which states that anyone born or immigrated into the United States should get equal protection under the laws. We will have to wait for the end result of the case, as the verdict would happen by the end of the 1890s. On September 8th, American Christian socialist Francis Bellamy would publish the very famous American Pledge of Allegiance in a magazine issue. The first time the pledge would be recited would be on the 400th anniversary at the Columbus Day holiday by a bunch of public school children on October 12th of that same year, though the verse that we know today was pretty much different in the first few years. Originally, the verse included, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation invisible, with liberty and justice for all." And the salute to the flag, known as the Bellamy salute, was very different, which, let's move on, shall we? Anyway, the pledge will later be recited across most American schools, and it would also go through some changes. We'll keep an eye on those changes as we continue this series. On November 8th, American lawyer and Democratic politician Grover Cleveland would win the 1892 presidential election, beating out Republican President Benjamin Harrison. This would make Grover Cleveland, at the time of writing and recording this episode, the only U.S. president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. On December 18th, Russian composer Tchaikovsky premiered his other famous ballet, The Nutcracker, a Christmas-themed ballet based on a short story titled The Nutcracker and the Mouse King. While the ballet wasn't an initial success like his last ballets, The Nutcracker would later become a famous piece many years later, and this would sadly be Tchaikovsky's last completed ballet, as he would later pass away on November 6, 1893, just 9 days after Tchaikovsky would premiere and compose his last completed symphony at St. Petersburg. He was only 53 when he passed away. To this day, some historians wonder what could have caused the man to die, with the most common expression being cholera after drinking unboiled water at a local restaurant, but some wonder if the death was an accident or intentional. Either way, it's clear that Tchaikovsky's work continues to have a strong impact in not only music, but any form of media to this day, as some of his pieces continue to be well known. On May 5, 1893, an American economic depression known as the Panic of 1893 would begin, putting major pressure on newly elected President Grover Cleveland and the Democrats to fix the issues. As banks and businesses began to fail, and unemployment began to skyrocket, leaving many Americans to blame Grover and the Democrats, while the Depression would continue for another 4 years before finally ending around 1897, which by that time a new president would step into the White House. On June 4th, the Anti-Saloon League would be founded in Oberlin, Ohio, becoming the most powerful prohibition lobby by the mid-1890s as they fight for prohibition on alcohol, drawing support from many religion organizations such as Protestants, Methodists, and others. On October 16th, American sisters, composers, and school teachers Patty and Miller Jade Hill would publish a songbook titled Song Stories for the Kindergarten. Among the songs in this book would be the famous Good Morning to All, in which the melody used for this song would later be adapted to the famous Happy Birthday song. We'll talk about that when we get to the year Happy Birthday was published. Sometime in 1893, American pharmacist Kel Burham would invent a classic American soft drink known as Pepsi, made from cola nut extract, vanilla, and rare oils. Originally, the drink was simply known as Brad's drink, named after the pharmacist himself. It wouldn't be until 1898 that the name would change to the way that it still is today. Speaking of cola drinks, on March 12, 1894, another famous American soda, Coca-Cola, would be sold in the iconic glass bottles. On August 1st, with tension rising over who had the influence for the Joseon dynasty of Korea, the Qing Empire of China would find itself in a war against the Empire of Japan, in what would later be known as the First Sino-Japanese War. Because the war will end in a new year, we'll come back to see how the war ended in the next trivia video. On November 1st, the first issue of American entertainment magazine Billboard was published and founded by William Donaldson and James Higgenden. Starting off as a magazine for people to advertise, soon readers would be able to catch the latest shows in places like fairs and circuses, until the Billboard magazine would also focus in on music, as inventions like the phonograph would start to become a common item in most people's homes. Also on November the 1st, Russian Emperor Alexander III would pass away due to kidney failure, leaving his son, Nicholas II, to take over as Tsar. We're going to keep an eye on Nicholas as we continue these trivia videos. Finally, sometime in 1894, English novelist Rudyard Kipling would publish his famous novel, The Jungle Book, in which the book follows a child named Mowgli and his life being raised by animals. Well, that will do it for the first trivia video in the series. Hope you guys enjoyed this little break as we covered other topics related to film, and we will get back to another trivia video soon. But for now, we're going back to talk about just movie events and move forward as we get closer to ending the 1890s. Anyway, this has been Sakura Diesel saying thank you all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And make sure you're subscribed to check out more videos of Film of the Year and other reviews coming soon. If you guys also like Let's Plays and walkthroughs, don't forget to check out my gaming channel, which the link will be in the description. And you can also check out mine and Bonnie's co-op channel, Review Bros, where we review movie and TV shows together. This has been Sakura Diesel saying thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next episode for Film of the Year, where we cover the latter half of the 1890s. Take care.